Joining us now, member of the House Intelligence Committee, Democratic Congressman Jim Himes of Connecticut. Welcome back to the show. Good to see you.
Good morning.
We'll try and transition the conversation back to the issues that you're dealing with on Capitol Hill. We've been talking this morning about impeachment. Is it still the mindset of most Democrats in Congress, or at least those in leadership positions, that it's going to be a wait for Republicans to come around? And are there any who will?
Yeah, good question, Mika. I think the question you just asked, the answer is sadly yes. You know, the Justin Amash phenomenon, the member from Michigan who made this incredibly principled argument in favor of impeachment, standing up, by the way, not for a left-right Democratic Republican thing, but standing up for the prerogatives of the Congress of the United States against a president who has said that the Congress, I will not produce documents, I will not allow people to testify. That is a very unique thing. What is more interesting, Mika, is that, as you know, a minority today of the Democratic caucus is actively supporting impeachment. But I must tell you that that is fraying. There are an awful lot of people, myself included, who are saying we are getting to a point where when the president completely ignores an unprecedented indictment of Kellyanne Conway for violating the separation between official functions and being a partisan person, and the president says that doesn't matter. When the president says, no, I'm not sending documents about the citizenship question on the census, within my caucus, there are people who are saying this has gotten so serious that it might be time to stop sort of, thinking about the, 9-point bank shot into the next 18 months and just call this president out for what he is.
A lot of different layers of concerns happening at once. You're especially concerned about Iran. This is what the president said yesterday.
Why should Americans trust your administration to tell the truth about what's going on with Iran? If we go to war, why should we believe you if they want?
Well, we have Iran. We've been talking to various people on lots of different sides, and we'll see what happens with Iran. We're very well set. We're very well configured. We have a lot of things going on with Iran. I spoke with President Xi this morning of China. We're looking at Iran. We have a lot of things going with Iran. We're very prepared for Iran. We'll see what happens. But let me just say this. We are very prepared. Regardless of what goes, we are very, very prepared.
Big picture, Mike Barnicle, I can't help but to see our credibility on the international stage just eroding before our eyes. People asking if he can be believed.
Yeah, every day. And Congressman Himes, we had Ambassador Wendy Sherman on earlier today, and we were talking about the possibility of slow walking us into a war in Iran. So I have two questions for you. One, your assessment of the intelligence that has been released, or perhaps that you've seen thus far, about the tanker explosions in the Gulf of Oman, credible, not credible? And B, what is your feeling about the possibility that we might, by accident, slow walk ourselves into a war with Iran?
Yeah, both good questions, Mike. On the question of the intelligence, obviously I can't get detailed in the answer to that, but I will tell you, having looked at some of the intelligence quickly, this is not a situation like in 2002 where people were saying it's a slam dunk and there was absolutely nothing there. There is no question that the Iranians have assumed a much more aggressive posture in the region themselves. They have any number of proxies around the region. They are saying they are preparing for a conflict. So again, it's not that there's nothing there, but the sad thing, and this gets to the second part of your question, is we don't need to be here. Where Iran is today is a function of the fact that the president tore up the Iran nuclear deal, which, look, we can have an argument about. I thought really hard about that deal before I voted for it, but we used to be in a world where war was out of the question. Yes, the Iranian regime was still a bad regime, but they weren't violating any of the terms of the Iran nuclear deal, as they have said they might do this week. We were at least hopeful that you might have the opportunity over time to build on that agreement. Instead, today we are in a place purely, and by the way, I'm not even going to say it's Donald Trump's fault here. In my opinion, the Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, a guy who I know well and who I generally respect, but who has a real blind spot with respect to Iran, John Bolton, the Saudis, the UAE, other players in the region are spending their days thinking about how they can create a situation where not that they convince the president to go to war, because I'm not sure this president can be convinced to go to war, but they know one thing, which is that if the president gets hit, he hits back. And you know how you get the president hit? You set up a situation with enough troops close enough together in the region that some nervous Iranian sailor or some member of some militia in Baghdad does something really stupid, and the next thing you know, the president is hitting back, and we are involved in yet another military conflict in the Middle East.
John Heilman.
Congressman Heilman here. I want to ask you about something you raised at the very top, which is the impeachment topic and the 18 Cushing bank shot and the calculations around that. We're starting to finally get some fact witnesses up on the Hill. Hope Hicks is going to come up there. There's other subpoenas that have been issued, but the real big kahuna still is Bob Mueller. And your chairman, Chairman Schiff, yesterday said time's running out for getting Bob Mueller up there. He says August would be too late. I think if you're going to get some momentum on the impeachment front, you're going to need to hear from him. So just explain to us, for a normal person out there in the world who'd like to hear from Bob Mueller, I think there are millions of them, what is the deal? Why is it so hard for your committee or any other congressional committee to get Bob Mueller up there on Capitol Hill, whether by invitation or by subpoena?
Well, the process itself takes some time, and that's the big problem here, right? It's the time element. You know, the president is basically saying, no, we're not sending people, we're not sending documents. Remember, he even told Hope Hicks that Hope Hicks couldn't comment on any of the time in which she was in the White House, which is most of what we are interested in, obviously. So we are meeting universal resistance from the White House. In the case of Bob Mueller, that's a little different. He no longer works for the Department of Justice. I'm sure they're going to try to stop him. Bob Mueller has his own reasons for not wanting to testify.
What are they? Because you know what? How much money did the investigation cost? I don't mean to sound like a Trump supporter. How much did how much did taxpayers pay him? And I'm sorry, does he really think that it is every American's way they want to spend their day reading the Mueller report? Some people are not going to read that government document. I want to know why Robert Mueller thinks he's above coming to Capitol Hill and testifying for Americans. It's outrageous. I want to know something else, Jim. Why don't you subpoena him? This is absolutely ridiculous.
He passed it to you.
He documented 10 examples of the President of the United States obstructing justice. He documented illegal or at least very improper contacts between people associated with Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. And you guys can't get him on Capitol Hill to talk, and he's too high and mighty to get on Capitol Hill and talk? Hey, I've got a picture of this guy in my house.
Yes, you do.
But this is absurd that he somehow thinks he's above testifying. And by the way, since you asked, if all he's going to do is read the Mueller report, then you know what I would do? I would say, do me a favor, you've listed 10 examples of how Donald Trump obstructed justice. Number 7 is pretty incredible. Could you read that for me, please? And if he goes, would you like me to read that for you? You go, yes. Yes. Millions and millions of dollars were paid for your report. Not everybody, Bob, is going to read it. So you read it for them. Like, this is seriously? I'll tell you what, as you can tell, I'm a little... this is outrageous that this guy has not been dragged to Capitol Hill to talk. That's all I got to say.
Joe, I have 2 things to say. Number 1, it's going to happen. He's going to get subpoenaed. Look, we have a profound interest inside the Intelligence Committee in hearing about something that we haven't heard nearly enough. And by the way, it'll be behind closed doors, so it's not necessarily going to be newsworthy.
Why?
But we must hear about
Why is it going to be behind closed doors?
Because what we need to hear about in the Intelligence Committee is the counterintelligence investigation.
Okay, so
that's totally separate.
So what's
the
going to be
other thing,
public?
which is what you're talking about so animatedly, is getting Bob Mueller, because for all the reasons you state, getting Bob Mueller simply to say what he said in the report, which, by the way, he said he would do. He said, my testimony is in that report. But as you point out, an awful lot of people haven't gotten through the near 500 pages. And so there is virtue in that. Now, look, you're being pretty tough on Bob Mueller here. I don't blame him for not wanting to join the partisan fray. But I do think that you and I both know this man. He is a patriot. He will do what he is asked to do.
He's a patriot.
He may do it reluctantly, but he will do it.
He was also a director of the FBI who had to come and testify. He is a patriot. I love Bob Mueller. I do have a picture of Bob Mueller in my house.
Yes, you do.
This is a guy who was told he couldn't go to Vietnam. And guess what? Unlike Donald Trump, he busted his ass to make sure that he could get there. He worked hard, and he was a hero at Vietnam. He was a hero after 9/11. I've got nothing but respect from him. But this coy routine is a bit much for me, Claire.
I agree.
A bit much.
But here's the thing, I think...
And by the way, can I just say, too, underlying this, the guy should have done his job.
Down, boy.
And the guy should have reached conclusions in the report.
I agree. And he shouldn't have ever let Barr do to him what he did. And he's smart enough to know what Barr did. But what I've got to say to the congressman, you've got to communicate to all of your colleagues on the Hill. Nobody in America believes you're capable of doing anything on impeachment if you can't get Bob Mueller in front of Congress. I mean, really?
He passed it to you in that press conference.
We'll get Bob Mueller.
This idea
Jim,
that Jerry
what
Nadler is doing press conferences trying to push Nancy Pelosi into impeachment when he cannot explain to the American people why a subpoena wasn't issued the day after Mueller talked about the report.
And passed it to you.
The day after. And make it not I know we all want to cooperate, and you try to work down the aisle of cooperation. I get that, believe me. But this is a moment where the American people need to hear it coming out of his mouth, and with questions being asked, both in the Senate and in the House. Now, the Senate's never going to do it, but the House can. So Jerry Nadler needs to quit talking about impeachment and talk about getting Mueller in today.
Yeah, look, I totally agree with that. And Claire, this is not so much an issue of Republican obstructionism, although that's happening. And that's, of course, why if there were impeachment proceedings, there would never be action in the Senate.
Correct.
But big picture here, remember, we are winning in court. We've won in court 2 or 3 times on subpoenas with the president's accounting firm, with Deutsche Bank. We've got lawyers in courts enforcing congressional prerogatives. I do believe that Mueller will be subpoenaed, and I do believe that he will show up. He's not the kind of guy who ignores a subpoena. But remember, there are 4 or 5 committees here working 24/7 against a White House which is saying no at every turn. And because we don't have a police force here in the United States Congress, we are forced to make appeals to the court, and that takes a little time.
Well,
I understand that that's
we're talking
frustrating.
about Bob Mueller. You can subpoena Bob Mueller. I think you'd come even if you didn't subpoena
All right.
Bob Mueller.
That's just...
By the way, Jim, I've got to say,
God.
of all the hits you've done, the Morning Joe, this is
Sorry.
your best.
Don't
no,
you wish you were-
I think you've been very
I
articulate.
think you wish you were stuck in traffic.
Like
And by the way,
I'm calling the producers because from now on it's nothing but herbal tea, okay? Just take that coffee cup away from Joe.
I put a check mark right here so I don't have to talk about this again. As you can tell, it's been bubbling up inside
Okay.
me
Yes, it
for about
has.
a month. And also, that was
Breathe.
fun.
Congressman Jim
I think I'm ready
Himes,
for
you're
a
a
drink.
good sport, but we're watching you guys. We want to see what happens. Thank you very much for being on
Take
the
care
show
now.
this morning.
You need a cocktail and
Poor guy.
a couple,
He'll be okay.
and a couple
He's
of
a great
cools.
sport.
Yeah.
All right, we got to
I'm
go.
gonna go smoke a menthol.
We gotta go.
I'm going to smoke a menthol, but I always
We got to go to break. Claire
No way,
McCaskill,
sir.
thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Still ahead, President
gosh,
Trump
Jack
was
was
in
here for that,
Orlando
man.
last night to kick off his 2020 campaign. Yes, Jack is here. But new polling shows that voters in the Sunshine State seem to prefer a few of his Democratic opponents. We're digging into those new numbers. Morning Joe will be back in 2 minutes.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.